Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the memorial service of VQ3 TACAMO Pacific Crew 4. I'm Captain Dennis Coach Warren, United States Navy retired. Having served with VQ4 and VQ3 as a department head, VQ7 commanding officer, and presently as on the board of directors, TACAMO Community Veterans Association, I'm honored to be here today in the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific, known as the Punch Bowl. As I entered the Punch Bowl entrance a few days ago, I just stood there a moment, reflected. A feeling of pride came over me as I saw Old Glory flying. At its base, the crest of each of our armed forces. Behind Old Glory, in a vast, perfectly groomed green field with gravestones neatly placed. You see, on this hallowed ground is where thousands of World War II brave servicemen are laid to rest from Wake Island, Guam, and around the Pacific Theater, and those that have perished in conflicts since that time. Sailors, Marines, soldiers, and airmen gave the ultimate sacrifice for our great country in the name of duty, honor, and country. In the distance, you see a majestic white granite memorial with wide, grand steps. You stop at the base of the monument. There's an inscription. It states, "In these gardens are recorded the names of Americans who gave their lives in the service of their country and whose earthly resting place is known only to God." I stopped to think about that, Crew 4. There were 16 shipmates lost on that fateful day. As you start walking up the stairs, there's a series of walls on both sides of the steps of the memorial. They are etched with names of those who were never recovered from battle. Mosaics adorn the walls and wrap around the back of the monument. They tell a story of those who fought battles throughout the Pacific. Below and behind Lady Liberty, you'll find a small chapel. This is their church home. Over to the left, there's a passageway through the walls. It is a memorial walk, the path lined with beautiful trees and monuments made of granite that lead to the overlook on the western edge of the volcanic crater. According to the history of the Punch Bowl, toward the end of World War II, tunnels were dug through the rim of the crater for the placement of shore batteries to guard Honolulu Harbor and the south edge of Pearl Harbor. Today we see an absolutely spectacular view of Pearl Harbor, Waikiki Beach, and Diamond Head. We are coming up on the 40th anniversary of that fateful day, June 21st, 1977. It's been a 5-year journey for Cheryl and Mike Voss, Vern Lockhausen, and me to find the Crew 4 monument a home. Last fall, during our 2016 reunion, Vern and I visited the director of the Punch Bowl and listened to the history and made this walk to the overlook. It just felt right. I said, we need to make this happen. I can't think of a more fitting place for the VQ3 TACAMO Pacific Crew 4 Memorial Monument to be placed. Halfway up on the right side of this sacred memorial walkway to the overlook at the National Memorial Cemetery of the Pacific, the Punch Bowl. Today is a celebration of life of TACAMO Pacific Crew 4, who are always deployed.
Will you join me in prayer? Our Creator, everlasting Father, precious Savior, Holy Spirit, we ask your blessings upon this day, this event, this place, and those who have assembled here to honor 16 men whose final resting place is known only to you. They are our brothers in arms. We are confident that they are in your loving care. Bring forth their souls in this hour, in this hallowed place, O Lord, so that they might be witnesses to the work that we do here today, to create a lasting memorial to their sacrifice. Your words, as recorded by the Apostle John, remind us in John 15 that no greater love has anyone than they lay down their life to save another. These men gave their lives for our freedom as a nation, and to teach all of us who fly this mission, it is vitally important and worthy, and also to constantly seek to do so both boldly and safely. We ask these things in your most holy name. Amen.
And here to tell the story of Crew 4 is Captain Vern Lockhausen, United States Navy retired. Served as a VQ-3 department head and commanding officer. He was the 3rd TACAMO Commodore and continues today as a consultant to the TACAMO community, in addition to being the president of the TACAMO Community Veterans Association.
I'm going to tell you a story. It was the last flight in a series of missions that the crew had to make during this deployment. The next stop would be home. Home to their families and loved ones. Home to their cars. Home to their rooms. To their ground jobs. Home to their leisure time. Going home. Over the past 7 days, they had flown the 8-year-old EC-130Q Hercules aircraft, Navy Bureau number 156176, over 40 hours. They had made 6 overnight stops. They had exercised the mission systems, working as a team to monitor for important messages, and then, when flash traffic came, they would extend the long and the short trailing wire antennas, bring up the 200 plus kilovolt amplifier, and send out an exercise emergency action message. It had been an exercise, just an exercise, but a vital one, and one that was monitored by ground stations and by other strategic aircraft that were flying at the same time, and more importantly, by submerged nuclear submarines. In the event the United States was attacked, the President viewed this attack as severe, and certainly if it was a nuclear attack, this was when Crew 4 would receive and then immediately transmit the nuclear orders for a counterattack. No one welcomed this possibility, but everyone knew that they were absolutely critical to this vital link between the President and those submarines. But tonight, that would be behind them. No planned exercise on this leg, the last leg home until their assigned missions, which will come up weeks from now. They had just flown from Hickam to the just west of Honolulu, and Wake was a refueling stop, about 2 hours on deck there. It looked to them like it would be about 6 hours. Once they left Wake, they would get home. Everyone was pretty relaxed. Some folks grabbed a sandwich. Some had a quick game of ping pong, while others fueled the aircraft. The flight engineers were Engine Specialist 82 Monty Metcalf, who was being trained by his first flight engineer, Electrical Systems Specialist AE1 Monty Nichols, who that night led the work at Plainside. Monty was assisted by 2 real system operators, Metalsmith AMH2 Robert Bond, and Electrical Systems Specialist AE2 Dave Coffer. Also in training and on his very first deployment was Airman Andy Barker, who was working his qualifications for plane captain. Plane captain's that position that cares for the aircraft when it's on the ground and taxis it in and taxis it out. For the mission systems, it was the navigator and the ACO, the communications leaders, the naval flight officers, Lieutenant J.G. Andy Aroshuk and Lieutenant J.G. Richard Eastwood. The mission crew was led by Radioman Chief Petty Officer Aubrey Russell, the most experienced man on the crew. The chief directed a team of young airborne communicators, Radioman Second Class Bill Juergens, and 3 in-flight technicians, AT2 Dan Miner, AT2 James Fall, and AT3 Dennis Mura. They brought up the circuits that they could reach out there in the middle of the Pacific, and they set up for others that would become available once they got airborne. Back in the States, Aubrey's wife Bobby had just given birth to twins, Melissa and Aubrey Jr. One of the officers' wives was expecting in the fall, and one was working long distance with his fiancée to plan their wedding. The men flying the aircraft up front were Lieutenant Jack Shrunk, the aircraft commander and the most senior crewman, co-pilot Lieutenant J.G. Mark Searing, co-pilot Lieutenant J.G. Dave Page, and the 3P, Lieutenant J.G. Pete Ledoux. They checked the weather, the winds, the route, the crew, the airplane, and were satisfied all was tracking well for an on-time departure. As the engineers completed the aircraft preparations and the comm systems were readied, the pilots met one more time with the navigator in base ops. One last look at the weather, the route, the fuel. They needed to add fuel for this leg, and following a time-honored TACAMO admonition, they added a few more pounds for Mom and the kids. It was 1,500 miles, but it still looked about like 6 hours. Plane side, the Wake Island executive officer, Air Force Captain John Nelson, came out of base ops, checked on the crew, making sure they had all that they needed. He heard their stories of home, of family, of the newborn twins, of the expectant mothers, of the pending wedding. And he felt their angst to just finish this deployment and be home for a while. In the aircraft now, they started engines as the brand new plane captain trainee Andy Barker and first flight engineer Monty Nichols provided the outside observers and the safety check. AD2 Christy Metcalf was in the flight engineer seat, behind and between the pilots. Once all 4 engines were online, they boarded, and Monty reported on the intercom to the pilots, crew aboard, doors closed, lights out, ready for taxi, check ground. Wake ops, Broom 17, ready for taxi over, called the co-pilot from the right seat, saying they're ready to depart. Wake Island Operations replied, Broom 17, taxi, position and hold at pilot's discretion. No traffic report in the area, you are cleared for takeoff. Everything must have looked fine as they taxied out and lined up on the end of runway 10. As the Hercules do when the brakes are set and the power is applied, 176 hunkered down, just waiting for the pilots to release the brakes and let her go. The co-pilot answered Wake Ops clearance by saying, Broom 17 on takeoff roll. Thank you, Wake Ops, for everything. Good night. With the brakes released, 176 started her takeoff run that would end at about 110 knots. And then she leapt into the sky to wing Crew 4 home. XO Nelson watched as the aircraft passed the beam at his position about midfield and noted that she had lifted off. Following the runway heading initially, she started to drift left and the climb out seemed to stop. And then, boom! Disaster struck. 176 impacted the water to the left of the runway center line, nearly 1 mile out over the water. The ocean there is 2,000 feet deep. An explosion lit the otherwise black sky where there had been no visible horizon when they took off. Within seconds, 176 came apart and all 16 members of TACAMOPAC Crew 4 perished. Never before, and hopefully never in the future, will this aviation community suffer the loss of a crew in an aircraft. But suddenly, the danger of what we do was forever planted in the minds of all who fly and will fly this mission. XO Nelson rushed to his fire department, and 2 boats were immediately launched in search of the crew. His operations duty officer notified Honolulu Center of the crash and that they were starting a rescue. The seas were 8 to 10 feet high in the crash site, and the only lights they had were the lights that were on the boats. After 4 hours of fighting that sea, they returned to shore empty-handed. The next morning, as an Air Force cargo jet arrived, the body of 1 crewman was found on the shore along with some parts that had washed up. Later, the Navy sent a deep submersible that explored the crash site, and they confirmed the absolute worst. The aircraft debris field was very wide and intermingled with debris from aircraft that crashed near the island in World War II. Nothing could be recovered. Back on Guam, the squadron CO called a rare late-night squadron muster. You see, the crew list for Crew 4 has several substitutions for this deployment. 1 pilot had stayed home because his wife was about to deliver their first child. One of the radiomen and one of the real ops stayed behind so that others could get the required training. Both flight engineers were flying off crew. Most of these fellows I've talked to over the years, and I've understood their deep-seated regrets and their sadness over this tragedy. Today they call it survivor's guilt. But there's no guilt in this tragedy, none. Another squadron was launched from Guam the next day out to Wake to investigate. The CO started the heartbreaking task of notifying next of kin. He ordered a memorial at the Guam-based chapel, and he insisted that he would lead that event and that he would write his own remarks. Years later, when I was the XO of VQ3 and we were approaching our 25th anniversary, I put an ad in Naval Aviation News for some history of VQ3. And Skipper Greenwood called me, and he sent me the crew list and the copies of the memorial and his comments of what he considered to be the worst day he had in the Navy 11 years ago at that time. Back home in the U.S., the families were visited by local Navy officials and told only that their loved one perished on a Pacific island while flying as a crewman on a classified mission. Benefits were later extended, of course, to each, but no further details other than they were told one family was able to provide a proper interment for their loved one. That notification was all those families knew for the next 35 years. In closing, this is very personal for me. The members of Crew 4 were about 2 years behind me in seniority and experience. I flew in their sister squadron, BQ4, at the same time out of Pax River, Maryland. We hosted BQ3 crews and flew with them so that they could learn how to fly the newest version of the communication system. In that way, these crewmen are my brothers in arms, flying the same aircraft, the same missions, facing the same operational and life challenges. During my first 2 tours in BQ3 in the 80s, we just did not speak about Crew 4. But we practiced the lessons that their loss taught us, and the Navy ensured that both squadrons had enough resources to practice what was provided to every crew. The official mishap cause is undetermined. Now, there simply was not enough evidence, not enough information to learn what really caused this crash. While that's a poor answer at best for the families and for us, the loss of Crew 4 strengthened everyone's resolve to ensure that the safety of the people flying and maintaining these aircraft in this important mission would be ensured. And that loss fueled TCVAs and hundreds of generous TACAMO veterans to pay for the monument we're going to dedicate today. I can find no more fitting words to say in closing except to quote President Lincoln from his address at Gettysburg, the battlefield where 50,000 American men perished in 3 days. To quote, "We cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it far beyond our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather to be determined to the unfinished work which they fought here, have so bravely and so far nobly advanced. It is rather for us here to be dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honors dead we take an increased devotion to that cause for which they gave their last full measure. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, and that this nation, under God, will have a new birth of freedom, and that the government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth."
I'd like to introduce the Operations Officer of Strategic Communications Wing 1, Commander Adam Hancock, former VQ3 Commanding Officer, and speaking on TACAMO today.
Thank you, Vern and Coach, for inviting me here to speak at the TACAMOPAC Crew 4 Memorial Ceremony. It's truly an honor to be here today. As Coach mentioned, I was privileged enough to serve as one of the commanding officers of VQ3. I serve side by side the finest men and women in the country, men and women who answer the call to serve this great nation. I was proud to lead our squadron in performing the vital mission of TACAMO, and it never ceased to amaze me how sailors just get the job done. But you know, as a commanding officer, you're not only responsible for ensuring the completion of the mission, but you're also responsible for the health and welfare of your sailors while you're doing the mission. That's no easy task, since the world we live in is a dangerous place. Aviation is an inherently dangerous business, and in the military, we frequently ask people to go into harm's way just to do their job. My greatest fear as commanding officer was that in the course of performing our mission, those actions would result in the injury or death of one of my sailors. A scary thought for anyone in any line of work, but that is the nature of the profession that we find ourselves in. We all freely take the oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. It is a duty we all understand. It is also understood by us that we may have to pay the ultimate price in the performance of that duty. VQ3 has 16 such members who paid that ultimate price 40 years ago. Everyone who has served in TACAMO knows the PAC Crew 4 story, knows their faces, knows their names. I remember as a young junior officer, first joining the TACAMO community, I was indoctrinated with the stories of Crew 4 almost immediately, as their pictures were displayed within a small area inside the squadron underneath the ladder well. I always felt a sense of reverence for them, those brave few who had so honorably served before me, performing the same mission, having paid the ultimate price, long before my watch in the Navy ever started. Later in my career as a skipper of VQ3, I decided that VQ3 PAC Crew 4 deserved a place all their own. A place where their story would have the most impact day to day on our sailors. So we created an area in the squadron along the passageway leading to maintenance control. And there are their pictures, along with several other items of memorabilia donated by the family and the TCVA, adorn the walls, and a small memorial that we commemorated just 2 summers ago. It is a small token of appreciation for those who paid so much, but it serves a greater purpose, because now every sailor who maintains or flies an aircraft is reminded of the importance of their duties and understands the intrinsic value that they provide to the freedom of our nation. Today's sailors in TACAMO are flying a different aircraft, but they are performing the same mission as Crew 4 some 40 years ago. And like Crew 4, they are willing to give it all to the accomplishment of that mission. This memorial here in the Punch Bowl will serve as a reminder to all Americans that 16 brave sailors served their country with honor and gave their all for the mission in defense of freedom. Let us not forget their sacrifice. On behalf of Captain McCabe, Commander Strategic Communications Wing 1, and the entire TACAMO community, we extend our sincere condolences to the family who lost their loved ones so many years ago. We can never replace them, but we can honor their service and their sacrifice. We salute you and the service of TACAMOPAC Crew 4, always deployed.
I'd like to thank the United States Air Force for that flyover. As we reflect on all that's been said today, we would be remiss if we did not consult the Holy Text to help us mortals put all this in context. For thousands of years, these texts have withstood the changing times, and still they bring us peace and understanding in troubled times and in not so troubled times. From the Apostle Paul in his letter to the assembled believers in Rome, probably written when Paul was in prison there for being a Roman citizen who was spreading the gospel. Romans 8:28-38. And we know that in all things the Lord works for the good of those who love him and who have been called to his purposes. For I am convinced that neither death nor life, neither the present nor the future, neither height nor depth, nor anything in all creation can separate us from the love of God. TACAMOPAC Crew 4 while lost off Wake Island 40 years ago this month, are not alone. Their souls and their families and friends are benefactors of that love of God. And from the Apostle John's account in John 11 of the resurrection of Lazarus, the Lord said to his family and all those who come afterwards, "Though a man be dead and buried, he shall have eternal life through the Lord." Crew 4 is the most well-known TACAMO crew ever. These 16 men will live forever in the hearts of their loved ones, veterans, and active duty TACAMO sailors who will come after them. The lessons learned from this tragedy that resulted in their loss are a part of the teaching of every TACAMO crew that has come along or that will come along after them. Our purpose today is to do earthly things in the spirit of that eternal life. Let us never forget TACAMOPAC Crew 4 and the sacrifice and the lessons they brought to generations upon generations of TACAMO flyers. And now will you join me in the benediction? Come, Holy Spirit, come with the fire and burn. Come with the rain and cleanse. Come with the light and reveal. Convict us, convert us, consecrate us. Lord, guard and guide all those who fly through the great spaces in the sky. Be with them always in the air, in darkening storms or sunlight fair. Oh, hear us when we lift our prayer for those in peril in the air. And all of God's people responded, Amen and amen.
Color guard, post. Please stand up.
Center, base. On a normal arm interval, stress to the head, stress. Ready, front.
TACAMOPAC Crew 1, report. TACAMOPAC Crew 2, report. TACAMOPAC Crew 3, report. TACAMOPAC Crew 4, report. TACAMOPAC Crew 4, report. TACAMOPAC Crew 4, report. PQ3, TACAMO Pacific Crew 4, take charge and move out. We've assumed the guard.
Hook's head, hook, right, face. Forward, march.